The Jeep Gladiator ride-on toy I've been working on for a long time now is nearing completion, and in this video I finish off the controls and structural components and take it out for its first drive. It doesn't exactly go as well as I'd hoped. All right, so the exhaust is now reinstalled with a good heat coating on there. Should keep the shedding down on this wrap and should keep it looking black and nice for quite a while, hopefully, and hopefully it won't come off for a little bit. It can just stay on there. Now, next thing is a big list of stuff to get this thing driving, and in no particular order, we're gonna start with the aluminum catch can. That's gonna go right down under here, somewhere underneath the carburetor. I didn't know that these high performance engines had to have one on here. Couldn't use a filter, couldn't just leave it. You know, actually have to have a catch can because they puke so much oil out. So we can put this down here somewhere, probably put a carb drain hose on this little nipple down here and probably put this hose somewhere so it's a little less floppy, get that all tied together and see how it goes. All right, so we got our catch can assembly fully in here. It's hose clamped to a piece of channel here that I think is the cutoff from the top of this piece down here. But anyway, it works out really nice. It's really snug and tight and strong. We got our drain hoses for the oil and for the fuel from the carburetor here. We got our actual vent hose for the crankcase going into the top, and then the breather hose to release the pressure coming out of the top here. So all that should be good to go. Next thing on the agenda is bump stops. I've got to put a bump stop here and then in the equivalent location over there on the other side. In the front, the bump stops aren't going to be a worry, so don't worry about those. The internal bump stops will work just fine because the coilovers are right here. They're vertical, and the coilovers will fully collapse before anything else hits anything. But in the back, the axle would hit the frame and my spine would turn to jelly immediately if I don't have a bump stop down here externally. So even at full squish, these will not fully compress anyway, so the internal bump stops in these will not do the job. So after we've got those bump stops drilled and tapped and installed there, then I'm gonna build a brake caliper mount that bolts to these two bolt holes here and squeezes on these discs. These discs have been just hiding in here for a while, but it's finally time to use them. So let's get that configuration worked out and I'll get back with you once I have it on there. All right, so we got our bump stops on here, and of course I can space them out with some washers. adjust them later if I need to, but I think we can get maximum travel and leave them all the way down right here, so that should work out well. I've got some caliper mounts now tacked in here, holding the calipers on both sides. I'm not particularly happy with the design or really anything aesthetic about these, but they'll work for now. Pretty much the calipers work by just squeezing this lever here so the cable mounts through this hole in this bracket I already had on, and it just pinches the disc in between the pads down in there. Pretty basic. I used these in my last build. Next thing we're gonna do is get some pedal boxes mounted in here for the gas and brake pedals, and then get some cables put in there. And I'm gonna try everything I can do to get the body mount bolts to be what the pedal boxes bolt into so that I can still take the body off with just the body mount bolts. So I'm gonna give that a try, mock some stuff up, see how it goes. All right, so we got two basic, kind of complicated, kind of odd looking pedal assemblies put in here. They came out a little stranger than I thought, but they work well. The brake pedal pulls on both of these cables. They run down underneath and around the steering column there. And they poke out back here at the axle and they hook up to the calipers that were installed previously. And then we have the throttle pedal over here. That works quite well. Cable routes down and underneath the floor. And then pokes out right here in the engine bay and goes into the carburetor. So I might do some cable rerouting later because there's some places where it interferes with some stuff just a little bit, like rubs on things, and there's some really tight bends that make the cables a little less smooth, but for now, it's gonna be okay just for the first test, probably. The next thing, and the only other thing that we need to route kind of under the vehicle, kind of run the way we've been running lines and cables, is the kill switch. We need to put a kill switch somewhere on this steering column and route it underneath and to this kill switch in the front here. There's kind of two reasons why we need that on this vehicle. One is, of course, safety. If something happens, something breaks, something lights on fire, whatever, we need to turn that engine off as soon as possible and stop the fuel flow. The other reason is that sometimes these torque converters on these little engines can they can creep a little bit, and so then you're trying to stand up in the seat. I'm trying to get to the kill switch to turn the thing off. It just is, it's not very safe. So anyway, I will get that figured out, get that routed, and catch back up with you. Okay, so I've got a basic kill switch mounted and wired in here. The wires run up with the fuel lines there to the other switch at the front. So now either one of those is off, the thing will not run, so that'll be great. The next thing is we need to get this whole thing sort of structurally adequate for a short test drive. The biggest thing is the suspension arms, as you've seen in previous videos if you've watched those, or just you can see right now. Pie cuts, not real strong, so I was gonna originally like plate the sides of the suspension arms and build all these sheet metal gusset stuff and all this stuff like that. I decided I'm gonna keep this simpler. This thing already looks crazy. What's a few more tubes? So I'll add a tube from say there to there, you know, here to here, you know, across this joint, things like that. And we'll just have a bunch of extra tubes tacked in there. And then suspension arms along with everything else, all of those things need to be welded enough that they're adequate. So I'm gonna get that going. All right, so we've got some welds on everything that probably needs welds to stay together for a test drive, in addition to a whole bunch of gusseting and bracing in the suspension there. Everything's come together pretty well. There's a few added stress locations now, like this spot, but a lot better than that spot being the stress concentration. So we'll work with that. I'll take care of the welds later that aren't on there yet and they need cleaned up. There's a few little rough welds that I did kind of in haste because I'm trying to get this thing going. For now, the next thing, we're very, very close to driving it. We need to do shaft keys in the discs and hubs in the back because I just never did, mainly so I could turn this thing around really easily in the shop. And also, there's a bunch of bolts that just don't exist, or are too short and not engaging the nylock, or are too long or something, or they're just the right length and perfect, but they just haven't been tightened yet. So I will get all those sorted out. Alright, so our bolts are all taken care of across this whole thing. There's a few of them that I couldn't quite get to, like down behind those brake discs, but they're gonna be just fine for a short test drive. Got their shaft keys down in there. Now, all we need is fuel and oil. It calls for 91 octane fuel and 10W30 synthetic, so I'll throw some of that in there, see if I can get the fuel primed up, see if it'll fire. All right, well, it fires up and runs. As soon as the weather is more cooperative, it's not raining anymore, a few days from now, we'll take this thing out on a test drive. Between now and then, I'm gonna put the body and the wheels on. Well, the first test drive did not go well at all with this thing. Basically, I had a lot of chain and sprocket issues. One thing was that the rear chain, the main chain back here, was too long. I had to take the half link out of it, and then I still put some little zip tie tensioners on it just to keep it on there for now. We might leave that for the moment, might not. We'll see if I can do anything else with the tension between these three sprockets. The biggest problem was this big sprocket right here. The chain was too loose, kept popping on and off of it, which is a big problem with a sprocket this large. So that got all jammed up. And then the key that was on this shaft, it seems like I only put a key for this sprocket maybe, and never really put an adequate one for this sprocket, because this sprocket moved too far over to the left and just came off the key, and the key started chewing out the inside of this hub because it's aluminum. So big problems here. I'm gonna pull the body off and pull that shaft up and out and see if there's still enough keyway left in the sprocket hub, and see if I can cut a new key for it. And maybe I'll do something about the other chain tension too, and maybe we'll get this thing figured out. Well, it does appear that this big sprocket never actually had its own key. It was just piggybacking off of this extra long key that was on this other sprocket here. So at least we still have 80% of a keyway left. And so I'll put a new key on here, and maybe I'll try to take that half link off of this chain or something. Try to get everything a little bit tighter, and then take two. Okay, well, I took an entire link out of the main chain back here, and that pulled everything real tight, pulled the intermediate shaft back, and thus tightened that chain as well. So the only thing I'm hoping is it's not too tight. Hopefully it'll stretch out just a little bit. So take three. Well, we've had some catastrophic breakage on the Gladiator that I think unfortunately kind of means that the suspension and steering is structurally compromised in almost every way. So we've actually had 3 different examples of structural breakage all at the exact same time that have really just demonstrated what some of us probably knew was inevitable. I knew it. Many of you viewers probably knew it. Those pie cuts and that little tube and all that stuff aren't going to hold up. So you might have seen in the clip that the rear axle kind of shifted forward suddenly. I haven't seen the clip yet, so I don't actually know. Should have watched that. But we had a few different failures at the same time. This one, the hind joint broke. This one over here, the tubing itself actually broke out around the bung. And back here, the track bar, the panhard bar, broke at the pie cut. So that probably tells you about all you need to know about everything that you already might have thought was structurally wrong with this thing. So I'm not really gonna go out and buy a tube bender right now. I'm not really gonna put a lot of money into this immediately. So for now, this project is on hiatus and we will eventually get back to it on this channel, but it's been cool. This thing will stay here in the shop. You might see it in some other videos. Someday we will get back to it and it will be way better and it'll work really well. So until then, thank you so much for watching this video and thank you so much for watching the series up to this point.